by the Okinawa Interest Group, World Beyond War, the Okinawa Environmental Justice Project, and the Police Philosophy Center. There were links to the sites of the other 3 organizers on the registration page and in the invitation email, and it is likely that our speakers will give a bit more information about these organizations. So before we get underway, I'll just give a brief explanation of the Okinawa Interest Group. The Okinawa Interest Group is a group that researches and spreads information, primarily about the US military presence in Okinawa. In January of this year, we circulated a petition asking for the construction of a military facility in Hinoko to be halted. Notable signatories on the petition include film director Oliver Stone, journalist and author Chris Hedges, former US State Department diplomat Anne Wright, and filmmaker and journalist Abby Martin. Abby, of course, will be speaking here shortly. The petition currently sits at just over 2,000 signatories. I will share a link to this petition in the chat at the end of the event in case anyone is interested in reading or signing. David Swanson with World Beyond War has been integral to organizing and hosting this open press conference, and I want to give special thanks to World Beyond War and particularly to David for taking his time and efforts in organizing and hosting this event. Before we move on to the main event, I would like to give David the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. World Beyond War is proud to be working with these wonderful people and organizations. We think that shutting down foreign military bases is a top priority in demilitarizing the world, and there is no place more appropriate than the incredible concentration of these things in Okinawa. World Beyond War is a nonprofit grassroots organization, educational and activist chapters by the dozens around the world. And we oppose not just a particular side of a particular war, but all sides of all wars and all preparations for wars and the environmental destruction that goes with it and the justification of secrecy and the risk of nuclear apocalypse and the blocking of cooperation that's needed around the world on non-optional crises and the incredible waste of resources that goes into war and preparations for war. So we think this is, this is a critical piece of that agenda for us, and we're happy to be a part of it.
Thank you so much, David. So one thing I just wanted to bring up about the Zoom meeting is if you go to the upper right corner and you hit view, if you want to hit speaker view, that will make it a little easier. You won't be seeing all of the participants, but just whoever is speaking at that moment. So if you want to do that for appearances, then I just wanted to give that instruction really quick. Also, just recognizing today is the 13th of June. And there are a couple of matters I want to acknowledge about the date that relate to our topic today. First, June is the Battle of Okinawa Memorial Month in Okinawa. The Battle of Okinawa took place in the spring and summer of 1945 to the end of World War II. And June 1945 is the time during the battle when the most civilian casualties occurred. It also came to my attention that today is the 22nd anniversary of the Yeonju Highway incident in South Korea, in which a United States Army armored vehicle struck and killed 2 14-year-old schoolgirls named Shim Mi-son and Shin Hyo-soon. And it is not our intention to schedule this press conference on the anniversary of a day when such a tragedy occurred. I wanted to respectfully acknowledge these events before we started the presentations. Now, moving on more about today's event, there will be 2 speakers, Abby Martin and Hideki Yoshiawa. Abby will speak first and then Hideki. As indicated by the title of the event, Militarization, Destroying the Environment in Okinawa and the World, the topic for today is the environmental impact of military bases, with a focus on the environmental effects of US military bases in Okinawa specifically. Please save any questions you may have until after the presentations. After both Abby and Hideki have had the opportunity to speak, we will open the floor to verbal questions about the information presented from journalists, media personnel, and people who may want to disseminate information related to this event. Our time for the event is set to 1 hour, so we will take questions from journalists, media, etc., until the end of the hour. At the 1 hour mark, we will bring the official event to an end, but open the floor to questions from all participants who are interested in staying longer to engage on the topics at hand. We know many people have tight schedules, so if you need to exit at the 1 hour mark, we completely understand. Without any further ado, our first speaker is Abby Martin. Abby is an investigative journalist, the creator and host of the documentary web series, The Empire Files, and director of Gaza Fights for Freedom, as well as the forthcoming documentary film, Earth's Greatest Enemy. Abby, I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you so much for all of the groups for hosting this crucial event today. Okinawa was really my awakening into anti-imperialist activism. I was a freshman in college, and I remember it was the height of the lead up of propaganda for the Iraq War. And it was just such a confusing, tumultuous time while, this unrelenting patriotic fervor had kind of captured the entire country. And I was just going the opposite direction. How the hell did this happen? What did our government do to invite, something like this? And also just the media propaganda that was so incessant. And so I dove into literature, books like Chalmers Johnson's book, Blowback. And it was such a formative moment for me because the chapter on Okinawa was so mind-blowing. It made me realize the scope and scale of the US empire, the ability to seize and capture land and then just treat it like your playground. The amount of sexual abuse and violence against Native and Indigenous people in Okinawa, the impunity that comes and is shrouded the US military around the world, wherever it hosts bases. It was so startling and disgusting that it actually was the impetus to drive me to everything I'm doing today. And so it was just amazing to dive into this movie that we've been working on for the last 3 years, which we're almost done. But to know and understand that I need to go back. I need, not that I've ever was there, but I need to go to Okinawa and really face what was the crux of my political radicalization. And so it was a beautiful thing to go 20 years after that awakening and be side by side with the activists who are putting their bodies, quite literally, in front of these machines to slow down the process. I've never been more inspired. I remember when I saw Okinawan people, moving very slowly, kind of just trying to slow down that process, which they successfully have by 50%. I just burst into tears the second that I saw them because I knew that they've been out there for 20 years straight. And that resilience is unprecedented. I've never seen anything that matches that sheer fortitude of the Okinawan people. So I think Okinawa is such an emblematic case study of just the environmental ruin and devastation that the military has brought upon the world, and also that heroic fight back movement of the people who have never stopped fighting. I think for this movie, we wanted to demonstrate that the statistic that we hear about the Pentagon's a larger emitter than 140 countries. What does that really mean, especially when countries actually sustain large population centers and host big agriculture and factories? And the Pentagon serves no point whatsoever other than projection of power. It's a completely useless entity. And so we wanted to prove the totality that goes far beyond just emissions, but really proves that a habitable planet is completely incompatible with an ever-growing military machine. And so we've been on the ground in several countries. I think Okinawa was particularly important because of what I said earlier about how emblematic it is, and in conjunction, the fight that's so necessary from the indigenous people to stop this madness. The Hanoko Bay, this Marine Corps base that they've been building for quite some time, it really is an exercise in pure destruction and absurdity. I mean, to raise this sacred mountain, to dump the dirt from the mountain into landfill, this beautiful ocean, where one of the last remaining blue coral reefs, the dugong mammal, I mean, all of these beautiful things are just completely threatened by something that might not even be possible to build. As I spoke to Governor Denny Tamaki, he just said this isn't even possible to sustain a base in this soft dirt. And so it really is it's really jarring when you realize that the military industrial complex, it's such a machine on its own that it doesn't even matter. It's just about funneling money to keep this project going despite everything, right? Despite the cost to the environment and despite even the feasibility of such a project. So it's that absurd notion of how far are they willing to take this just to the nth degree. But Okinawa is just the tip of the iceberg here. There are two big lessons from Okinawa that I think we can glean from. It's the habitat destruction, how much they're willing to sacrifice just to grow, and also the toxic fallout. What cost that big military is having in terms of chemical leaching and waste that it dumps, the deadly footprint that will be left for generations. Um, of course, US bases are constantly being built everywhere, pristine habitats being blown up in training. And I think looking at, Okinawa and extrapolating that out to the 800 to 1,000 military bases around the world and really realizing that every military base is a dumping ground. It uses the indigenous people as guinea pigs to test new weaponry. And the environmental regulations are so lax because, look at the Superfund sites here. These are toxic sites that are designated for immediate remediation and cleanup here. We have the EPA and environmental law here. What is the Pentagon doing around the world with complete impunity where they don't have to worry about pesky environmental laws? And I think that we see the effects of that perfectly in places like Okinawa. The PFAS chemicals is something that's really dire. But if you look at just the sheer amount of vehicles, the arsenal, the land armada that the US military hosts, that's where that statistic of 140 countries comes from. It's not even the toxic fallout and the habitat destruction and all these other things that we're talking about in terms of the Pentagon being the largest institutional polluter. They're just talking about the emissions that the Pentagon counts themselves, which is absolutely fascinating. When you really add in the nuclear fallout, the toxic fallout, all of these things, or just the sheer amount of chemicals that's needed to clean the machinery of the B-52 bombers, the tanks, all of these things, it becomes unquantifiable, actually, because we're talking about producing several tons of toxic waste every single day just to maintain the arsenal. So that's shocking in itself, right? But it gets so much bigger than that. Like, just nuclear proliferation and waste. The fact that the US military is now doing these next generation nuclear weapons after Obama approved this $1 trillion update to our nuclear arsenal. They're opening dozens of new plutonium pits around the Lawrence Livermore lab. Look, the risk of nuclear winter, I do not trust the United States to have its hands on nukes. Being the only country that's ever used them. And now we're facing an even more dire situation where we have a lunatic state, Israel, which is also nuclear armed. There's so many precipices of like nuclear conflict around the world. It's just absolute madness and lunacy that we're still dealing with nuclear weapons at all. And then when you look at the toxic fallout from war, of course, and habitat destruction from that, I was always under the impression that depleted uranium was, it obviously is the most heinous thing to use because of its shelf life of over 1 billion years, and it never really goes away. But what I was most shocked to learn from the research of this documentary was just small armaments, bullets render places completely uninhabitable. They make places dead zones environmentally for generations. So we're just talking about bullets, and there is nowhere where there's armed conflict that does not use that. And we're talking about training too. So obviously, war is the most important thing to stop, build a community for global peace. But really, it's about abolishing the profit-making arm of the military-industrial complex and scaling back this global reach of the United States empire and military. And this isn't some radical idea. There's people in Congress proposing drastic cuts to the budget because right now we're spending about $1 trillion in pure death and destruction. So, the pristine Ora Bay, I think, is a perfect case study of what's going on around the world. And the larger issue from all of this is the United States propping up fossil fuel dependent economy and infrastructure. That's why there's 800 to 1,000 bases around the world to have these launch pads to keep the resource flow and capital flow going for US, the ruling class essentially in the West. And so, I think that where we're headed now is really fascinating because I've been in I've been inside the military. I went in the RIMPAC war game ships. I went into these defense contractor conferences and COP26. I was there confronting who should be the leading politicians on climate change, as well as the actual generals and these pampered military officers that are never addressed with any hard questions about this. And all of them, it didn't matter what side of the political spectrum these people lied on, all of them addressed a very dystopian setting of the world that we're entering into. And that is climate change is here, it's coming. And instead of mitigating one of the big sources of it, which is the US military and the Pentagon, we're going to use them to further militarize the solution. And so they're using the Pentagon and the military as the solution to the impending crisis. It's very alarming. And I was told straight up by one of these defense contractors who scoffed at my face when I brought up the idea of greening the military. Not that I think that's a solution, but I brought it up because that's what so-called progressive Democrats in Congress are saying. And he said, we're never going to stop using oil. It's a pipe dream. So bringing it back to the solution here, I think building up this internationalism, international solidarity, and awareness of how imperialism is driving all of these crises around the world, whether it's the migration crisis, whether it's the genocide in Gaza, all of these things. The bottom line is a massive military empire where Pentagon is supreme is completely incompatible with saving the planet and preventing the worst impacts of the climate catastrophe. And we have to get our heads together on that fact and insert this into the growing climate movement and the environmental movement. If we don't address militarism, our planet doesn't have a chance. And I'll pass it over to Hideki Yoshikawa and our gracious host, who I was also really honored to interview in Okinawa. He's an incredible speaker, and I'm honored to share the floor with him. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Abby. Sorry, I'm just going to go a quick introduction to Hideki before he starts. And what you had to say was chilling and very pertinent, and I really appreciate you being here today and spending your time with us. Thank you so much. We turn now to our second speaker, Hideki Yoshikawa. Hideki is the director of the Okinawa Environmental Justice Project, which aims to protect the environment and communities of Okinawa from the overwhelming presence of US military bases on Okinawa's islands. He's a resident of the city of Nago on Okinawa Island, an anthropologist at Mayo University and the University of the Ryukyus, and the author of many major articles at the Asia Pacific Journal Japan Focus. Hideki, I'm handing it over to you.
Great. Thank you. I want to share my screen. Okay, just a second. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let's see. Thank you, Erin, for your introduction. And thank you, Abby, for your presentations. It's really a big reminder that the world we're facing today is so militarized and wars everywhere, and really have to be connected with each other. And your presentation makes me think that how this international network of peace movement is very important. And thank you, Okinawa Interest Group and World Beyond War and the Peace Philosophy Center for hosting this open press conference. And thank you all for participating in this conference. As Erin introduced, my name is Hideki Yoshiawa, and I'm the director of Okinawa Environmental Justice Project. With this project, we've been trying to bring international attentions to help stop the destruction of Okinawa's environments by the US military bases, and now the Japan's self-defense forces. Today, I want to draw your attention to this specific project, militarization project, that the Japanese and the US government have pursued for the last 27 years in Okinawa, despite our continuing oppositions. The Japanese government is constructing a military base at Henoko-Ura Bay for the US military in the northern part of Okinawa Island. There are two reasons why I want your attention to this project. First, this Henoko construction project demonstrates how Okinawa, an already heavily militarized place, has to face further militarization and further environmental destruction from it. The rich biodiversity of Henoko Ura Bay is being destroyed, and we need to stop this destruction. Secondly, I believe this project is stoppable. It is stoppable because the people of Okinawa and our supporters are determined to oppose it. It is also stoppable because the environment of Henoko-Ura Bay presents a natural obstacle to the project in the forms of extremely soft seafloor at the construction site. Before I'll talk about the militarizations and Henoko project, I want you to show this map. And I want to discuss two aspects of Okinawa. Okay. The first is the geography of Okinawa. As you can see on this map, Okinawa is the southernmost prefecture of Japan. It consists of 160 islands with 48 of them inhabited by people. 1.4 million people live in this Okinawa. And Okinawa is very close to, as you can see, Taiwan and China. So this Okinawa's proximity to these areas is regarded as a geopolitical importance. And it has been used as reasons for the militarizations of Okinawa. Second aspect is the historical relationship between Okinawa and Japan. Today, Okinawa is a part of Japan, of course, and many Okinawans regarded Okinawa as such. But in the past, we had our own kingdom, the Ryukyu Kingdom, with our Ryukyuan languages and culture distinctive from those of the Japanese. However, in the late 19th century, Okinawa was subjugated and incorporated into Imperial Japan. Since then, the assimilation of Okinawan people into Japan has been completed in many aspects of our lives. This complicated historical and political relationship with Japan has played a critical role in our daily life, and that's including militarizations. Now, let me talk about the militarization of Okinawa and the Henoko-based construction project. As you can see on this map, Okinawa is a heavily militarized place. There are 31 US bases and training areas that exclusively used by US military in Okinawa. And about 8% of Okinawa as a whole is occupied by the US military. And the Okinawa Island, that's where I live, the main island of Okinawa, 15% of the island is occupied by the US military. The presence of US military bases in Okinawa becomes more complicated and disturbing when we consider these numbers. Okinawa consists of less than 1% of Japan's landmass, but 70% of the US bases and the facilities in Japan are concentrated in Okinawa. I want to also add that further militarizations is taking place as the Japanese self-defense forces have been building and their own bases and deploying missile defense systems in the Yaeyama and the Miyako Islands. And of course, the pretext of this militarization are the China threats, and possible Taiwan contingencies. It's a scary time that living in Okinawa, and just like in many other parts of the world. But how has Okinawa become so militarized by the US military? as Abby described and Erin mentions, towards the end of the World War II, Okinawa became a fierce site for the Japanese and the imperial force and the US military. In the Battle of Okinawa, the lives of 200,000 people perished and much of the environment destroyed. And after the war ended, the US military took over people's and the communities' lands and converted them into military bases and training areas. That set the footprint of military presence for the next 79 years until today. The US occupations of Okinawa from 1945 to 1972 solidified the militarization of Okinawa. During the Korean War and the Vietnam War, Okinawa became a launching point for the US military to engage in the wars in these areas. In 1972, the reversion of Okinawa to Japan took place. Okinawa was returned to Japan, and many Okinawans hoped that Okinawa would be free of US military bases and all the problems, crimes, injustice, and hardship associated with them. But as we all know, the reversion did not end the presence of US military bases in Okinawa. Instead, it formalized the presence of the US military bases. In this new context of Okinawa as a prefecture of Japan, the Japan-US Security Treaty and the State of Forces agreements between the two countries legitimize the militarization of Okinawa and allow its harmful impacts on the people and the environments, often with impunity. One example of these militarizations and harmful impacts is found at the US Marine bases, Marine Corps Phutema Air Station. As you can see in this map, the Phutema Air Station is located in the middle of Ginowan City. Their aircraft taking off and landing at the base causes thunderous noise day and night. The base has also been contaminated. The base has also contaminated the ground and water and the land with harmful chemicals such as PFAS. And the local people must live in the fear of falling objects from aircraft and of course, possible aircraft crashes. In fact, in 2004, helicopter crashed in the Okinawa International University. Remedies for such harmful impacts and dangers are very limited and ineffective. Japanese court has ruled that noise pollution from the US aircraft has caused health damages to the people, but they have never ordered or asked US military to stop flying over these areas. The issues of land and water contamination with the PFAS have alarmed the local communities, but the Okinawa prefecture governments and the local communities, local municipalities cannot conduct their own on-site surveys for the contaminations at the Phutema Air stations. So the issues of PFAS is actually up in the air, so to speak. Now let me talk about the Henoko-based construction project. The Henoko, this new base, the Henoko-based construction project is building the new base at the Henoko-Ora Bay as the replacement facility for the dangerous Phutema Air stations. The Japanese and the US governments realized that danger of Phutema and decided to close the base. However, this replacement project was not any voluntarily or goodwill moved by the Japanese or US government. Instead, this project was a response of those two governments to the outrage of the Okinawan people over the rape of a 12-year-old girl by 3 US servicemen in 1995. In 1996, both governments set up the Special Action Committee on Okinawa, and it proposed plan to reduce the burden of military bases on Okinawa. And in 1997, the SACO decided to temporarily be closed, and then the replacement facility will be built in Nago. And after going through some changes of this construction plans in 2006, both governments agreed on the current Henoko plans. As you can see here in this map, construction of the base requires land reclamations of 152 hectares. It will have 2 runways in a V shape, and it will host more than 70 aircraft. And it will have a seaport functions, and it will be connected to Henoko ammunition depots. And Okinawan people, we cannot see this as the form of reducing the burdens of US military on Okinawa. This is simply a further militarization of our lands. But to carry out this plan, Japanese governments then had to conduct the environmental impact assessment. It was through Okinawa's Defense Bureau's environmental impact assessments that rich biodiversity of Henoko Bay was revealed and confirmed. Only an area of 30 square kilometers, Henoko Bay is a home to 5,300 species that include 262 endangered ones, like the dugongs and the blue corals. Compare these numbers with those of Hawaii's marine, one of the largest marine sanctuaries, national monument. This 582,578 square miles marine protected area is home to 7,000 marine species. In Henoko Bay, we got like 5,300 species in such a tiny area. In Hawaii, we have 7,000 marine species. So because of this rich biodiversity, environmental issues become key issues. And protection of the biodiversity environment become a rallying cry for the people of Okinawa and the environmentalists beyond Okinawa. However, Japanese government was also determined to pursue this project. And the Okinawa Defense Bureau's final environmental impact assessment, EIA, concluded that base construction and the base operation would have no environmental impacts. With this no environmental impacts conclusions, the Japanese government obtained the approval for land reclamation from then Okinawa Governor Hirokazu Nakayama in 2013. And of course, the next year we had the elections, governor's election. The Governor Nakayama lost in the elections, but the base construction was started with his approval. Construction started on the ground in July 2014, and the land filling at the water at the sea began in December 2018. Then the new Governor Onaga, attempted to try to halt the project by taking the issues to the Japanese government and the court. His principal argument was this: democratic voice of Okinawa, the people of Okinawa, was against the base constructions, and the environmental concerns emerging from the ongoing constructions. There are serious problems. However, the Japanese government and the Japanese court always refer to the Okinawa Defense Bureau's no environmental impact conclusion. And that's from the EIA and from the subsequent monitoring reports. But in the late 2018, the issues of soft seafloor emerged. This was a critical moment. The Japanese government admitted that the seafloor at the construction site in Ora Bay is extremely soft, and the base construction now requires massive ground reinforcement work. And it also admitted that the two active faults were crossing at the construction site. So this soft seafloor requires massive ground reinforcement work. As you can see in this here, Okinawa Defense Bureau is planning to drill 71,000 sand piles into the seafloor to solidify the ground. And 16,000 of them will be 1.6 to 2 meters. That would be like a 5.3 or 6.7 feet in the diameters. And they'll be driven as deep as 90 meters or 300 feet below the water surface. And then Japanese government or Okinawa Defense Bureau insisted again that seafloor reinforcement work would have no environmental impacts. That's just crazy conclusions, but that's how they keep pushing this construction project. But to continue with the construction project and do massive ground reinforcement work, the Okinawa Defense Bureau must obtain the approval from the Governor Deni Tamaki, who was elected in 2018 on the platform of anti-base construction platform. So, and in last year, December 2023, the Governor Tamaki refused to approve the reinforcement work. So we thought the construction would stop. Then Japanese government used this execution by proxy. That means like Japanese government approved this reinforcement work or design changes on behalf of the governor or on behalf of peoples of Okinawa. That's very ridiculous. And then construction work now continues. But last 3 years or 4 years since this construction, that soft seafloor issues become very critical, I've been paying attention to the US side. How have the US government and the think tanks viewed this construction plan and soft seafloor issues? While the base construction is set to continue within the context of Japan and Okinawa, US governments have shown they have a different views on this construction project. The US Congress Research Service, the Government Accountability Office, and some think tanks have released reports. These reports really question this space construction project, especially the seafloor issues, soft seafloor issues. In 2019 April, Congressional Research Service in their pamphlet, it's called In Focus. It stated that additional challenge adding to delay in the relocation is the physical difficulty of construction offshore runways for the base. It was discovered that underwater soil is less stable than originally thought. And June 2019, again, CRS, Congressional Research Service report, they wrote, uncertainty remains about the costs and time frame of the project. And again, CRS wrote in October, additional challenge is the physical difficulty constructing the offshore runways for the base. And again, the same year, October, Center for Strategic and International Studies, they published a report, and the reports stated that project completion date was pushed to 2022, but the recent reports about soil instability and the potentially expensive fixes have cast doubts about the entire endovers. And in 2020, June 2020, we saw this National Defense Authorization Bill proposed by the House Armed Service Committee, subcommittee on the readiness. And as you read this one, you can see this, how this US Congress Armed Service Committee was concerned with this seafloor issues. The Congress asked the DoD to produce reports that should detail the description of seafloor conditions, including the assessed end values below the proposed facility, and a proposal for addressing concern, including solidified seabeds, plans for any additional environmental planning. And there are so many issues that we are very concerned were addressed in this bill. However, interestingly, and unfortunately, this bill never made it to the actual National Defense Authorizations Act. So it was very unfortunate. But again, 2020, the CSI's Mark Kanshian again released the report. It basically says it appears unlikely that this Henoko project will be ever, it appears unlikely that this will ever be completed. So having understood this, how the US governments were perceiving this Henoko project, especially the issues of South Sea floor, NGOs, Okinawa Environmental Justice Project, and with other NGOs, we began to have meetings with the Ministry of the Defense. And we're being asking the Ministry of Defense whether the US government agrees with the ministry's assessments of the feasibility of Henoko-based construction. And we asked them, do they really agree with their feasibility studies? And the Ministry of the Defense could not give answers to our questions. It just insists that they had provided information on the seafloor reinforcement works to the US government. And both governments were on the same page regarding the Henoko is the only solution agreement as a policy. So last year in September, Okinawa Environmental Justice Project with others filed the US Freedom of Information Act request with the US DoD to release its analysis and evaluation of South Sea floor and related issues. We asked the DoD to release what would be their expected completion time and the feasibility of Henoko plans in their analysis, and what would be the environmental impacts from seafloor reinforcement work in their analysis and evaluations, and the operability of the base. And of course, we have not really get any response from the DoD yet. But interestingly, in the last November 2023, the US military's top officials in Okinawa publicly expressed concerns and views on the Henoko construction project. It was in a workshop organized by the US military, and the local and the mainland Japanese reporter was invited to this workshop. And the local reporters, Okinawan reporters and Japanese reporters asked about the this construction's seafloor issues. So concern for military operation due to seafloor that was expressed. And this officer also expressed that the concern that runways are too short for the ones shorter than the ones at Futenma. Thus, Henoko base's operational function will be very limited. And the completion date although Japanese government said like 2030 somewhere, but this officer said 2037 at the earliest, or even later. And the US military would like to continue to use the Futenma Air Station. So these comments are very important, and we want to explore these comments and see what we can take these issues to lobby with the U.S. government, U.S. Congress. So this is where at right now. The feasibility of a Henoko-based construction is in question because of this soft seafloor. But destruction of the rich biodiversity at Henoko-Ura Bay continues. And the Futenma Air Station continues to pose dangers to people's lives and the environment around the area. And sadly, nobody in the Japanese government appears willing to review the Henoko-based project. And the US DoD has now released its analysis and evaluation of the soft seafloor and the seafloor reinforcement work. But I believe this gives us some directions, and with all the network, and we can have, especially with the US our organizations and the supporters in the US, we can push these issues to the US government and the DoD and the US Congress people. And we hoping that we can stop this construction. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hideki-san. That was full of really wonderful information, just very well presented. Thank you so much. Now we'll be opening a question and answer session to journalists and media personnel. If you identify yourself as an independent journalist, a person associated with news media, or a person who might otherwise write or disseminate information about today's presentations, this is the time that we would invite you to ask questions. Please go to the bottom of your screen and click reactions. There's a little arrow and you should be able to click raise hand if you open up that little area. So that will indicate to us that you have a question. In order of raised hands, as best as we can figure, unfortunately, the program doesn't record the order for us. We will call on you by name and the Zoom host will unmute you so that you can ask any questions verbally. Before asking your question, please identify yourself by name and, if applicable, with your media affiliation. Any questions in the chat will not be prioritized. We'll only address chat questions after addressing verbal questions. You can also address which speaker that you'd like to ask the question to if that is your preference. With that being said, I'll now open to questions. All right. Let's see, we've got one raised hand. Yuri Smouter, I'm so sorry if I said your name incorrectly. Let's get you unmuted. Oops. Yeah, go ahead and unmute and ask your question, Yuri.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just
Perfect,
fine.
perfect. And actually, you got my name correct, so thank you very much for that, Ms. Jones.
I'm glad to hear that.
Well, okay, all right. My first question is to Ms. Martson, which is, what is this? Oh, yes, Yuri Smouter of 1+1, which you can find on YouTube. And my first question is to Ms. Martson. What is the state of the environmentalist movement or eco-socialist movement, and recognizing that one can't be an environmentalist, let alone an eco-socialist, and support any kind of militarism? And I say this as someone based in Belgium, where at the moment, Green parties and Green left parties across Europe have faced like stunning election losses. And I have another question to both Ms. Martson, but also to Mr. Yoshihaka, which is, I know in Okinawa, there is popular resistance to the US militarism and Japanese militarism. And in John Pilger's film, The Coming War on China, about the pivot to Asia, Pilger showed that a governor in Okinawa won a huge election on the mandate to close U.S. military bases, but the late Shinzo Abe of the ruling dominant party, the Liberal Democratic Party, simply ignored the will of Okinawa. And I'm curious, in Okinawa, do governors and people across the party line continue to get elected on the mandate of ending U.S. military bases, but the government of Japan / Tokyo simply ignores them? And what message would Mr. Yoshihaka like to say to people who continue to support the pivot to Asia without realizing that they're supporting very reactionary forces in Japan and South Korea and more militarization of the region by doing that? Thank you.
Thanks, Yuri. I'll just really quickly pick up on that and hand it over to Hideki. But I think that the answer is pretty plain and clear as day to all of us, is that there's not enough of a consciousness about militarism and how it's driving environmental collapse. And that's precisely why we are doing webinars like this. That's why I'm doing a film on it, because there's only, a couple academic studies and cursory things that are floating out there about this. No one's really addressed the totality of this and why it has to be a main intervention in the global environmental movement today. I'd say that consciousness is changing. We're seeing a radicalizing moment, a very important moment in history around the genocide in Gaza, that people are making these connections and understanding how militarism is driving so much of this. And so that's really great. And that's why things like this are necessary, to capture the attention while we have it, of the global community, especially younger people, Gen Z, people who are realizing that the future looks very bleak unless we're really diving headfirst into the problems and figuring out the solutions with eyes wide open, right? I want to know what is going on. I want to see how devastating and how detrimental the environmental collapse is that we're talking about, and how we can really make an impact with our solutions. And I think going and doing man on the streets at these big climate actions and realizing how limited the scope of understanding is about how much the Pentagon's driving this, I think that's changing, even though it's been difficult for everyone who's attending this, especially people like David and stuff, to, it's been a long time coming, and I think we're here, and I think people are ready to hear it. And that's why things like this are so crucial.
Okay, thank you for your questions. Okay, in Okinawa, we have elected, in the last 3 elections, we have elected governors who ran their election campaigns on the platform of anti-Henoko-based construction. So I think the people's voices is still there and clear. But as you mentioned, the Japanese government, Shinzo Abe's government especially, I think, and they didn't really listen to us. They always said, okay, we will be working with you, we will listen to you, but it seems like there's no willingness on the part of the Japanese governments to give up on this project. But at the same time, as I presented in my I did on my presentations, this seafloor issue is huge issues. Again, nobody's sure whether this is feasible or not. This project is feasible or not. And so we will try to spread the word to the mainland Japanese and also the international community and to the US government. So the informations, sharing the information is very, very important. And I see this, because I'm really focused on this Henoko and northern part of Okinawa and the militarizations. But like my understanding is that if we cannot stop this, there will be no really hope for many other parts of the world which has suffered from wars and the militarizations. In Japan, we have our democratic systems, although it's not working for us, the Okinawans, but we are still in the better conditions than many other parts of the world. So we wanna be a good example. Actually, we wanna prevail.
No, thank you, arigatsu, and thanks, Ms. Martin.
Thank you so much for your questions. Moving on, it looks like the next person we have is Pat Elder. So let's see if we can unmute.
Yep.
Perfect.
Hideki and Abby, thank you. I mean, just stellar, wonderful. You've both filmed me with like, I want to hit it harder tomorrow, So here's a quick question for both of you. Prime Minister Kishida is an imperial lapdog. What do you think are his greatest fears regarding his program of the escalation of militarization? Like, what's in this guy's mind and what scares him? What keeps him up at night? That's all. I'm done.
Hideki, this is on you.
All right, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I wish I knew actually what Kishida was thinking, but like it's last month that we had the Chinese Xi and the Korean South Korean president and Kishida, they had meetings, and then there is some hope that on the Japanese side, not only not the Kishida, but people in Japan, there's some hope that this type of dialogue between the three countries, the three Asian countries, continue, and so we will find some ways so that we don't need to get the U.S. always, involved in this, impacting the direction that Japan has to head. So, but yeah, sorry, I couldn't answer, but
That's okay.
maybe you know better.
Abby?
I mean, I do know that Japan is obviously kind of having imperial nostalgia. And so, for the longest time, we were looking at Japan as, oh, maybe this is kind of the future of demilitarization and, Japan accounting for all of its past atrocities. But I think that we see the way that, global capitalism works is that it doesn't really work that way. And so just the complete, just callous disregard for indigenous people in Okinawa from the Japanese government, even though, you have the highest ranking political official that's been democratically elected pleading to stop this madness, and they just get completely ignored. It's just heinous. It's just heinous. And it's just Japan is just another imperial collaborator. They're a junior collaborator with this entire system. And it just speaks to the point of the necessity for a global movement of internationalism, because as much as the indigenous people in Okinawa are fighting for their right to survive on a habitable island, they're not being listened to. And so it has to fall on the shoulders of the babies of the empire. I mean, we are the children of this military machine, and that's why the awakening political education here is such an imperative necessity.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for those questions and the answers as well. It looks like we've got one more question, then we'll at least wrap up like the hour-long session, and we might go into an extended session if people have more questions that they want to ask. But first off, I hope I'm getting your name right, Iara Matarali. If you would unmute, and there we are.
You are. Thank you so much. First person in a while to get that name right. Really appreciate it. I have a question for Abby. I mean, you talk about, the sheer scale of environmental devastation and the US military global footprint. I'm wondering, considering, the Pentagon's kind of status now as one of the largest, if not the largest institutional polluters in the world, are there, if any, mechanisms or international frameworks that could be effective in at least holding the US military accountable for its environmental impact in Okinawa and other regions in the world? And are there any maybe existing precedents or ongoing efforts that at least offer a roadmap for achieving accountability from the US and environmental justice?
It's an amazing question and a really important insight to kind of glean from, and unfortunately, we're looking at a world today with the most barbaric atrocities that I've even ever heard about in history being live streamed and televised daily on our devices. And there's just a shroud of impunity and lack of accountability for not only Israel, but the main subsidization for this, which is the United States. And so this whole notion of an international rules-based order and all of these things that were systematically applied after World War II and all of these horrific things that happened during the war that were attempted to prevent these things from happening again have been completely thrown out the window. And so it's worrisome looking at the world today and the lack of legal application of international law and the complete blatant disregard for that when it comes to human beings, the sanctity of human life. So when you apply that to non-human life, I'm very worried because for me, I mean, we're all one human family, and to think of the just devastation of the environment that comes along with these military onslaughts, it's really hard to wrap your mind around. And so I'm hoping that the multipolarity that's emerging, even though it doesn't necessarily mean a peaceful world, it means that something can offer a counterweight and force the United States into compliance with just law and morality, right? If we can just have that. And so I'm hopeful in this horrific moment that we're living in that something will emerge that will stop this and that will hold the US to account. And that is going to have to come again with mass education and political awakening and mobilizing. But I hope to God that other world leaders will step up to the plate and apply, do something. And we need to reshape these norms and we need to really understand how is the UN, is the UN enough? Are these international courts enough? When the US and its allies are completely removed from this process, we need something else. That consciousness and awakening is emerging. It's just a matter of how is that going to manifest and what is it going to look like? And what's going to happen in the wake of that? And what does demilitarization really mean? What does it look like? And will the US do that peacefully? And I think these are all questions that are very important and that are worth fighting for.
All right, thank you so much for that question. It looks like we have come to the end of the hour-long session. That doesn't mean that we're going to close. We still want you, if you've got your hand raised, please keep your hand up because we'll want to address your questions. But we will be closing the official event and turning over to extended time. I'll be sharing a link to the petition in a second. I think Satoko did already get in there and share that. If you have any questions or want to connect after the event, I'm going to be putting an email address in the chat and it belongs to the Okinawa interest group. We're happy to engage with you more on these topics. To those of you who must leave now, thank you so much for your time and participation. We hope that you found the content engaging and take care. To those of you who can stay on with us, please don't leave. We will stay and talk longer. So in the extended portion of the event, I want to say that we are still recording. So by participating, you are still agreeing to being recorded. We'll open to the floor to questions from all participants. Continue using the same raise hand reaction, and we will try to take questions in the order presented. If you want to leave a question in the chat, we will try to get to it. I'm just not sure if we will be able to today. So I will start out calling up the next person, which I believe will be Joseph Gerson. We'll get you unmuted.
Okay, so I think I'm unmuted.
Oh, no, great. Thank you.
Okay, so just to appreciate the presentations, part of it is heartbreaking in terms of seeing how little has changed now over these many years. And some years ago, Hideki will remember several of us met with the U.S. Consul General in Naha, who boasted that the entire island of Okinawa is a U.S. base, and that's sort of the mentality that goes forward. Yeah, on the one hand, sorry to see how little has changed, and on the other hand, a little bit encouraged to hear about the 2037 date there. I mean, which I think reflects the recognition in some circles that what we're seeing is sort of sort of a pantomime, a drama here, which ultimately has no meaning at the center, right? And that the ongoing construction and destruction of the bay is really a way to try to symbolically keep the U.S.-Japan alliance, to show the alliance is strong, and they're against China. My question, I think, for Hideki here is, as you think about the forces here within the United States and those in our peace movement, anti-militarist movement, where do you see a leverage point for us? Where would particular actions, and what would those actions be that you see would be most helpful in your struggle? Just to appreciate also, your steadfastness and dedication, which is really, really impressive.
Thank you, Joseph. I really appreciate your support and appreciate your question. So it's really, in many ways, it's a difficult question to answer, but because I've been involved in this for a long time, and then I get some encouragement from the fact that I've been able to talk to some Congress people in the Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then with, of course, with the support from the U.S. citizens like yourself. So my plan right now, our plan is like we will focus on those in the power, especially Congress, who are more environmentally oriented and who are more conscious about environmental justice and wary of the U.S. militarizations. We'll find these people and we'll talk to them, and we will ask them to help us with our cause. So that's how I'm trying to do. And I have several people. I mean, some of them you suggested. I have several people in my mind, and next step is like make reports on this issues, the Henoko issues, and then we'll be able to talk to them.
Please stay in touch so we can provide what support we can.
Right. That's yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, so it looks like Abby will have to go here pretty soon. Do either of the people who have their hands raised currently, Don Smith or MJ, have something specifically to ask to Abby before she has to go? I'll have you both unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, hi, this is MJ. Hold on a second here. I am. All right, wonderful. Can you see me there? All right.
Yes, can do. Thanks.
So yes, my question is for Abby. Abby, first and foremost, thank you for being with us. Secondly, my name is MJ. I am a host of War Impact alongside Yara, who we've had earlier ask you a question. I'd like to know what strategies have proven most effective for local communities and environmental activists in resisting the negative impacts of militarization. Are there any poignant examples of successful campaigns or legal battles that you can provide? Or for instance, how have grassroots organizations or organizing international solidarity, legal action, and public awareness campaigns contributed to the success of resistance efforts in this specific location?
Yeah, and I think that I think that Hideki can speak more to the successes on the ground, specifically when we're talking about Okinawa, but I will say that the legal fight has been very essential. Organizations like the Center for Biological Diversity and Earth Justice, especially when we're looking at something like the RIMPAC war game exercises that were just, the military can do whatever they want. They can go in protected waters and endangered habitats because it's a matter of national security. And so for the longest time with these war games, they were just using these high frequency sonar trainings that would reverberate for hundreds of miles in the ocean and kill scores of marine mammals. I mean, it was just absolutely horrific what was going on and it really took litigation from these organizations to force the hand of the Navy to modify. But what's amazing now, it's the cynical approach, kind of in terms of just the entire political apparatus as well as the military, as the pressure from environmentalists and the climate change movement is becoming more strong. You're seeing them adopt, just like they do to defang all political movements in the past. They adopt and steal that language of climate change and climate justice and are actually using that to pretend like they're actual environmental stewards now. So it's really fascinating. I mean, with the new RIMPAC, the new iterations for the last several years, they're actually saying that one of their main objectives is environmental stewardship. It's just batshit crazy. But I would say, directly investing on the ground and building up the indigenous people who know the land, who know how to adapt to climate change because they've lived it. And so I think that we're going to see that more and more is the understanding that the change needs to come with the communities that are living it instead of these kind of NGOs and like these international organizations who take a lot of overhead and who aren't plugged in locally at all. And so whether it's indigenous people in Okinawa or Chamorros, in Guam or just the indigenous people like the Yupik people in Alaska, I think it's finding and rooting out those institutions that are directly helping to either sue the military because the military doesn't care about any language other than like lawsuits and making it completely untenable for these generals to like go out in public and eat dinner. So, that's where we're at. We have to make it so these people can't step foot outside of their homes without being reminded how much of planet destroying monsters they are. And we have to go every angle, whether it's the courts, whether it's doing these direct actions, and whether it's just protests in general or petitions. I mean, we just have to keep up every single avenue of the battle. And that's the only language they know.
MJ, maybe I can put something. I can provide some information regarding the legal battles. Center for Biological Diversity and Earth Justice supported our fights in the U.S. federal court. The Dugong versus DOD. That was like a well-fought battle, starting 2003 and ended in 2020. So although that we lost in the end, but that length of the fight we took and the kind of information we gathered from all the legal processes just was tremendous. I give you one examples. So the DOD was ordered to study the impacts of the military-based constructions on the dugongs by the court, by the ruling, so that they did study actually the impacts of the military-based construction on the cultural aspects of the dugongs in Okinawa. And in the process, the DOD commissioned scientists. They have to review the Japanese environmental impact assessment. And his criticism of the Japanese environmental assessment was brutal. It just says that no value cannot be used. So it was like most critical view I got from any governmental officials. So that was very encouraging to us, to me. Somewhere, when you fight in the courts in Japan, we lose actually. Always the Japanese government wins. But in the U.S. court, yeah, we get some very, very interesting stuff. And we got good connections actually from those, the scientists that are working for the DOD. They were able to help us actually. So, and yeah, they remained as a scientist. they said, oh, can provide our views, scientific views, and that was very helpful. So that sort of helped me sort of keep on fighting, actually.
Thank you so much for your questions, MJ. It looks like right now we've got one hand raised. I'm afraid Abby did have to leave, but she said thank you so much, everyone, on her way out. We do have Don Smith with his hand raised. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes,
Great.
so Hideki, I'm surprised that there's not more opposition among the Japanese public and among politicians against U.S. U.S. Bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and in Japan lost the war. You'd think that there'd be some hostility towards the U.S. and also maybe with nationalist parties, which might not be good, but they might be anti-American. Anyway, I'm just curious about the public in general. Maybe they're not informed about it or don't care, but tell me about the peace movement in general in Japan. That's what I want to know.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for a question. That's really important questions. Yeah, we Okinawans always wonder why many Japanese, don't come join us. One of the reasons is that because the presence of the U.S. military base is so concentrated in Okinawa, and if you live in the mainland Japan, you don't need to see actually the military bases, U.S. military bases. So out of your sight, out of your mind. That's how it goes. And but we have a very continuing strong peace movement in Japan. That's sustained by older generations actually. So I really appreciate. But again, the number is very small. So that's the problem that we have. And then we have this propaganda, I would say, of China threats on Taiwan contingency. Just they drumming up this propaganda and then just affecting the general public in Japan. And then the idea is like, oh, we have to militarize, against the China, against the North Korea, these things, and so it's really a hard time. But again, there are still strong anti-peace movements, people involved in this one. So I hope, that they'll continue to do so, and that we can spread this movement.
Thanks so much for your question, and thank you, Hideki, for answering. I don't see any more raised hands at the moment. If you've been holding on to a question, I'm going to give it, about another minute. I think we are going to have to wrap up here in about 10 minutes, even if there are more questions. Okay, it looks like we've got one from Yuri Smoder again. Let's get you unmuted. Oh, please unmute. Hello? Oh. Maybe not.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Well, somebody in the chat asked if the presenters are finding support in any allyship, and what role does capitalism play in Okinawa's militarization? Oh, it's an interesting one.
Oh, you're muted, Hideki, if you're trying to answer.
Okay.
Oh,
So
sorry.
could you repeat the first question? I got the second question. What's role the capitalism plays in Okinawa militarization?
Are you finding any support in any allyship?
Okay, thank you. Yes, yes. I have, many supporters actually, like the Okinawa interest group the ones that organizing this ones, and the World Beyond War. This is like very, very strong supporters. And also, as I said, the Center for Biological Diversity and Earth Justice. They are very, very helpful organizations that is supporting us. And also, like International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, their Sirenian sections, Sirenian groups has been tremendous help. So, and also we got labor people that in the US part, they were supporting us. But again, the question is like, all these supports enough or not? But it's, I found it that through these network supporters, I be able to like reach to like politicians, US politicians. So in that sense, that their supports has been very, very helpful. Okay, and then the next question is capitalism. Okay. So, you know, that Okinawa has been militarized for such a long time, and that our economy is also militarized. You know, like you're talking about military industrial complex. We have the smaller version of a military industrial complex. For example, there are many, small construction projects on the basis. These projects has been contracted out to local construction companies. And so that's this economy in a way that it's a militarized economy. It's still big. And with this now, the many bases being built in Okinawa, that again, I'm really worried about this. The militarized economy will grow, so that's really worries me. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuri.
No problem.
So-
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for watching the chat. I'm sorry, I dropped the ball a little bit on the chat. I did notice one question that I'd missed before as well, because you'd mentioned it. So one question I found was, how supportive are the academic communities both in Japan and in the West around the problem of Okinawan militarism?
How supportive? Okay, that's interesting question. The ones I work with, academics, yeah, they're very supportive. But again, the number is small, very small. And then even at the university levels, they're talking about U.S. military-based issues. It's difficult for some scholars, some academics. The idea of being neutral, objective, that idea has been often used by some academics not to talk about the military issues. So it's kind of strange when I'm kind of disappointed. But again, the ones that I talk to, yeah, they're very helpful. And the one that in academia, I work with, the ones that I work with, I want to talk to, I want to exchange ideas. Yeah, they're helpful. But again, the same, the number is small.
Yeah, thank you so much. That question was from Mariko Kage, so I'm sorry for not having mentioned your name before, Mariko. I haven't seen any more questions come through the chat. Like I said, I'll give it, maybe another minute if one person wants to ask one last question, but I think then we'll have to wrap up. In the meantime, I will share one more time the petition link and the link to the email address where you can send any other questions if you have anything after the event that you end up wanting to ask after you've absorbed some of the information a little more and had some time to think on it. I know sometimes that's how it works for me. But yeah. No, I'm not seeing anyone jump to ask questions, so I think we will wrap up the session. All right. Well, thank you all so much for taking your time to attend today. A big thank you again to our speakers, Abby Martin and Hideki Yoshikawa, to our co-organizers, World Beyond War, the Okinawa Environmental Justice Project, and the Peace Philosophy Center. I keep saying it like it sounds like police, so I'm sorry, it's the Peace Philosophy Center. We hope that you got a lot out of the time that you spent with us today. Please feel free to reach out to us using the contact information I left in the chat. On behalf of the organizers, thank you all again for your time and participation. We'll be closing the session now, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.